Okay, awesome. Well, welcome in. Thank you guys so much for joining tonight's webinar. You got the emails, you got the texts, all about reversing cognitive decline, early stages of cognitive decline in Alzheimer's with a root cause approach. Specifically, we're going to be talking about the RECODE protocol, which is what I run. I've seen all the research. I'm certified in it. It's pretty outstanding what they're doing, though there is a lot to it, and that's why I want to bring it to everybody in the masses and understanding exactly how it is, how it works, what it is, and that's what we're going to be covering here tonight. And understanding why a root cause approach is what is needed to not just heal your brain, but prevent any long-term issues. So thanks everybody for also saying, what you're here for. We got prevention, we got reversal, and understanding, that both of these things are possible for your brain, I think is really key. And we're going to get a little bit more into that. But first, why do I do this? Why do I talk about brain health so much? Why do I coach people through an Alzheimer's diagnosis? Why do I coach prevention? First, you already know, if you've seen any of my posts or anything, my mom was diagnosed with early onset dementia at 56 now. And, she's very close to my heart. I love her so much. I was a big mama's boy. And now she's in memory care. And I watched that decline over the last 5 years. And I don't want that to happen to anybody else. And so I do this work for her and for people in the future that need help in this area. But outside of that, there's a lot of data coming out about Alzheimer's and its impact on society. In America alone, last year in 2025, Alzheimer's cost the US $781 billion in estimated costs. That amount of money kind of comes into play from healthcare costs. It comes into play from lost wages, from caregivers having to quit their jobs to take care of their loved ones. It comes from quality of life lost and the effect it actually has on society. And so this massive number of $781 billion is just going to continue to grow if something is not done, if the standard of care does not change, and if people don't start preventing this disease. That also takes a huge toll on the caregiver. One, if you've ever had to care for somebody, you know that it's mentally draining, it's physically draining. And then the mental toll on the patient of thinking and knowing that they have this disease that is going to essentially slowly end their quality of life is devastating. And we don't want that to happen either. So if you're here, you've likely seen this disease firsthand, whether through a parent, a loved one, whoever it may be. And the goal tonight is to give you an idea of what else is possible, what this new standard holds, and understanding the protocol that I'm going to walk through. Because the point of the RECODE protocol and its creator, Dr. Bredesen, they truly believe that we can end Alzheimer's and dementia for good, make it a thing of the past. Do I truly think this is possible? Essentially, I do, but it will take a lot of time and it will take a lot of shifting to this new standard that is blazing a new trail. Knowing that, let's jump in. First section I want to cover is why the root cause approach matters for brain health. Because so far, the standard of medicine, the model that has been built, is for acute care, for like single symptoms at a time and single mechanisms that work in the brain. They diagnose, they treat the symptom, and they move on. This model fails for chronic multifactorial diseases like Alzheimer's and dementia, because Alzheimer's isn't just one thing. There are so many different things, dozens of compounding factors that go into an Alzheimer's diagnosis, that go into decline. And those things can range from inflammation, insulin resistance, metabolic dysfunction, toxic load, nutrient deficiencies, hormonal deficiencies, chronic stress, poor sleep, sleep apnea is a huge one, gut dysfunction, just to name a few. And there are so many more symptoms that can really, or causes of these diseases. And we have to understand and pair up, like, okay, what is the root cause for so many different people? That's why a single drug will never work. It doesn't work right now, and it never will, because there's so many different things that play a role. Root cause medicine asks a different question, what the typical pharmaceutical companies ask of, how do we manage this symptom? What is that one underlying thing that helps us manage the symptoms? But we need to be asking, why is this happening in the first place? And then what can we actually do about it? And Dr. Bredesen, the one who created the RECODE protocol, in his book, talks about how he was asking, why is this happening? And then he figured that out. And then he'd ask, why is this happening? And then why is this happening? Just over and over and over till you get to the very minute details in understanding how the brain works and why Alzheimer's forms in the first place. There are three big categories for intervention when it comes to Alzheimer's and dementia, and mainly really any disease. The first being removing what is driving the breakdown, whether that's something like inflammation, whether that's toxins, then rebuilding what's actually been depleted. So, say nutrient density in your body, if your gut can't absorb them as well, we need to rebuild the ability to get those nutrients back. Hormone imbalances, we need to rebuild that hormone balance. Then finally, restoring what is actually needed to function. So, restoring sleep, restoring your metabolic health. All of those things are really, really important to do, especially not necessarily in that order, but very close. Your brain is constantly also either building or breaking down synapses and neurons. And those are the little things that fire in your brain and kind of help your brain grow and form new memories, form new skills, and stay healthy. We don't want those breaking down. And in an Alzheimer's state, that's what's happening. Your brain is breaking down, you're losing neurons, losing cells, and that's a natural response to so many different immune factors that go on. Unless it's unnatural from, say, toxins on the outside, but that turns into a different conversation. The goal is to flip that switch back to building, and you can do that at any age. Case in point is a case study from a clinical report that the RECODE protocol and Apollo Health and Dr. Bredesen did in 2024. So I'm going to go over this case study because I think it's really important to understand what's possible and understanding exactly what someone's actual protocol might look like before I jump into what you can do at home. So this actual case study from 2024, a 75-year-old female, she was a professor and she was diagnosed with mild cognitive impairment, so MCI, associated with development to Alzheimer's disease based on her amyloid beta pathology and her blood tests. Her initial presentation, she had aphasia. She had really strong trouble with speech. It was unintelligible in certain scenarios. She realized it was even worse whenever she couldn't complete creating a gingerbread man with her granddaughter. She couldn't remember how to do it. She forgot then to pick up her grandchildren from school twice in 2 weeks, which is not a normal occurrence for her. And then she also noticed that she started struggling with spelling, shopping, cooking, using a computer, everything that was easy and came naturally beforehand. All became difficult. Her testing showed that she was ApoE34, so she had one allele of the ApoE4 gene. She also had a positive amyloid PET scan, and what that means is they do a PET scan that used to be the gold standard of diagnosis. And it showed that she had amyloid buildup in her brain. And typically with those PET scans, that's how they used to diagnose people. They'd see how much amyloid was building up and they'd diagnose you that way. Her hippocampal volume had shrunk pretty significantly since or from the average for her age group. And she also had multiple inflammatory markers elevated in her blood work. Things like homocysteine and hsCRP were both very elevated. She did get put on a traditional drug-only approach in a clinical trial. She had the amyloid beta anti-amyloid antibodies with the infusions. She got worse with each and every treatment. It's in the clinical study here. It said that every time she had the treatment for 3 to 5 days after, she would get markedly worse in her decline before it would slowly start going back to baseline over the next week or so. So of course she discontinued the drug because it was very obvious that it was making her worse. Then she found RECODE. She started this precision medicine RECODE approach. And in 17 months, her MoCA score, which MoCA is a diagnostic cognitive assessment. I can run MoCAs. I'm certified to do so within the RECODE protocol. Her score went from a 24 to a 30, back into the normal range. Her hippocampal volume went from the 14th percentile to the 28th percentile, so she had measurable structural improvement from her MRI. Her speech clarity returned back to normal, and then she could finally cook, shop, use the computer, and take care of her grandkids again how she used to. But then the big kicker comes with the sustained improvement that she saw over the next 3 to 5 years. In years 3 to 5, she called her cognition the best that she's had in the last 20 years. So not only did she return to baseline, she was better than she was before. And I want to point out a key aspect of this. The best that she felt was years 3 to 5. This is not a 3 to 5 week program. This is not a 3 to 5 month program. This is a year after year program. And that doesn't mean to say, like, if you did work within the program, you have to constantly work within the program. This is to say that what you learn within Recode, what you learn for your brain health, this lifestyle change that you make isn't something that you just do and then stop. This is something that you make a change for and then continue doing until it becomes second nature so that you can keep doing it year after year after year and feel better and better and better. So keep that in mind as we talk through this, because years 3 to 5 was when she felt the best. It wasn't weeks 3 to 5, right? Year 6, though, she had a secondary decline. And this is when this is what I want to point out as like really important for understanding why root cause considerations need to happen. Further investigation revealed that she had severe obstructive sleep apnea, which was a new development over the last 5 years. She had fungal colonization in her nasal passages from exposure to new water damage in her home. So there was also mycotoxins or mold. So she was exposed to mold. She had this new fungal colonization in her nasal passage, likely from the water damage as well. And she had severe obstructive sleep apnea. All of these coupled into new symptoms like terrible sleep. She was depressed. She was more anxious. She had a lot more apathy. And she was starting to forget things again. And her speech was starting to get worse. She went back, got more tests done, and then actually had treatment for these new root causes that they found. They got a CPAP, they got an antifungal protocol, they got a mold detoxification and home remediation. And the result of finding these secondary root causes later on and resolving them showed cognitive scores returned to higher than ever in year 7. And she came back to baseline on all accounts, all categories. And so twice she went into this decline state, into this MCI state, and twice she was pulled out of it back to baseline, if not better, at age 75 by dialing in the exact root causes. Now, talking about it like this sounds really easy. It's a lot of work, it's a lot of change, and it takes a lot of time. But at the end of the day, this is what works. Finding what is going on in your body, in your brain, in your life, and targeting those specific factors are the key, especially for those that already have an MCI diagnosis, that have subjective cognitive impairment, or any loved ones that have an Alzheimer's diagnosis that's early enough on. But how do you actually get started from home? It is possible to start from home if you do not want to join like a Recode protocol, if you do not want to join like a Precode account, and getting like these things dialed in with a practitioner or a coach. There are a lot of things that you can do at home, and I'm going to talk about those in the basics now, because you don't necessarily need the full protocol to start moving the needle unless you do have a diagnosis. I want to reiterate, if you do, you need to work with somebody like that. Full stop. I'm not going to sit here and say that you can make drastic shifts into your cognition just by doing things from home and trying to do them on your own. But if you're here for a prevention and prevention's sake only, you can start getting started moving the needle now. These are the foundational pillars that you can, foundational pillars of Recode that anyone can do. But I want to bring up something before I dive into them, which I know you're probably like, I just want to get to the pillars. I just want to know what exactly I need to be doing at home. But it's really important that I bring this up at the front. Everybody needs to start small and slow. Because if you've ever tried to take care of your health before, what most people like to do, and I see this over and over with clients, is they're like, I want to do this, 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 and this. I want to try to tackle it all. I'm going to start a new sleep regimen. I'm going to start, fasting overnight. I'm going to start eating a super healthy. And they do everything really well for like 5 days, and then they burn out. Everything is too hard. And they think, this is too hard. I can't do this. When in reality, it's not too hard. We just try to do too much at once. I have to slow certain clients down because they're so gung ho. I say, look, let's leave these things over here and let's work on this one thing that will give you the biggest benefit this week. Let's work on this one thing that might be the hardest, but we'll figure it out together, and then you can move forward and progress a lot faster. And that is the way you should look at this. You should not try to do everything all at once. And I know there's going to be people that still hear that and think, well, I'm just going to try to do everything all at once. But I promise you, it'll be way easier if you make time for 6 months, 7 months, 8 months, 9 months to a year to take on these things and get really good at each and every one of them. The first, let's talk nutrition. The protocol in Recode is called KetoFlex 12-3. The 12-3 stands for a 12-hour minimum overnight fast. If you're ApoE4 positive or in a high inflammatory state, typically you want to push out to like a 16-hour fast, but that's again totally dependent on the person. And the entire goal of the KetoFlex diet is to start working your body towards getting into ketosis. This doesn't mean a true keto diet. that's called Keto Flex for a reason. You want to make it to where your metabolism is functioning so well, you can either use ketones or glucose to fuel your body and fuel your brain. And because a lot of times what happens with the brain is it starts losing the ability, its cells get a little bit of insulin resistance. Then it can't intake glucose as well. The alternative to glucose is ketones, which comes when we burn fat for fuel. A lot of people that have been not eating really well, eating really high carb based diet, not fasting enough throughout their life, like naturally fasting, not intentionally fasting, don't really produce ketones. And so we want to make sure your body can actually do that so it has the ability to be metabolically flexible. So no food within 3 hours of bed is what the three stands for, to create that like 12-hour minimum overnight fast. Also, not eating before bed will help your body get into what's called autophagy, where the cells actually break themselves down and kind of clean themselves out. The main thing throughout this diet is it's plant rich. And so we want a lot of vegetables, a lot of different colors with low glycemic index. So things like blueberries are really good because they're super colorful. They're lower in calories. Yes, they're carb based with the natural sugars, but then say like a banana, which isn't inherently bad, just a lot more carbohydrates, a lot more easily uptake sugars. And so it's harder to get in ketosis that way. And that's the whole foundation of this low glycemic index. We want a lot of quality fats. So omega-3 fatty acids are going to be a huge baseline. We want to add as many of those as we can through our food before we even look at supplementing with them. And then protein is still very important, but for those looking at brain health specific, it doesn't need to be nearly as high as say like a weight loss protocol. And so protein, then it needs to be around like 0.7 grams per pound of body weight instead of like closer to the one, like 0.6 or 0.7 grams per pound, or 1 gram per kilogram of body weight if you wanted to use the kilogram measurements. We also want to make sure you're eliminating ultra processed foods, refined sugars, refined grains. And for most people, this is the hardest part by far, especially if their diet has consisted of that for a very long time. Now, some people come in and they're already cutting all those things out. We just need to work on their nutrient profiles, maybe. But for most people, ultra processed foods, cutting them out, cutting out alcohol, cutting out sugar is really hard. And that's where accountability from a coach can be vital in working through that. Next in this pillar is going to be movement. Daily walking, most underrated and easiest thing you can do. If you're not walking at all, just starting with 5 minutes is going to be huge. Resistance training and working on building muscle 2 to 3 times a week is going to be another massive lever. This doesn't get talked about as much in the Recode protocol. For me personally, I think that this is a more important factor than what gets talked about, because a lot of what gets talked about is cardio, getting in like higher intensity cardio, mainly for vascular health. But I think the resistance training is just as good if you look at the studies, and it is better at increasing BDNF, which is called brain-derived neurotrophic factor. And you can think of that as fertilizer for your synapses, fertilizer for your neurons in your brain. And we want to increase that as much as possible. That's what's considered a trophic factor. And anything called trophic factor is just what's going to help your brain grow new synapses and cells. The optimal weekly minutes for exercise is going to be around 150 minutes per week. Though, very important, this is dependent on the person, because if you're doing zero, you're not going to do 150 minutes next week. We're going to try to do 30 minutes next week, 25 minutes next week. It is very personalized. It is very individualized. So these rules aren't perfect rules. They do not need to apply perfectly to you. They need to fit around your lifestyle and what you're capable of currently. All of the exercising as well, we want to improve insulin sensitivity again in the brain cells, especially, and exercise is going to lower inflammation. And so we want to make sure all that happens. Sleep. Sleep is a big one. People are all over the board with sleep, especially if they've got kids, if they're stressed, if their hormones are all out of whack, like if you're going through perimenopause and menopause. But we have to fix the sleep. 7 to 8 hours a night of sleep is like kind of the baseline. Seven's like the minimum. We want to make sure that that's happening, and not just laying in bed for 8 hours, but getting deep restorative sleep, because deep sleep is where your brain actually purges toxins and cleans itself out and rejuvenates. And we want to make sure you're getting that deep sleep. Environment is really important. Cool, dark, quiet environment is really key. Improving sleep, though, is very personalized to the individual. And so some people may need a de-stressing practice before bed. Others may need magnesium threonate, and that's all they need to function well, or 5-HTP, which is the like a precursor to tryptophan, which is going to help your serotonin levels, lull you to sleep. Some may need a full cortisol management protocol. It just depends on the person. And so it's really difficult to say like you need to do this exact thing for sleep. Otherwise, no eating 3 hours before bed, cool, dark, quiet environment, and then depending on what's stopping you from actually getting good sleep, we'd have to have a conversation to understand that a little bit more. If you suspect you might have sleep apnea, you snore, get a sleep study. This is a non-negotiable, absolutely 100% non-negotiable. Sleep apnea in every single protocol that's ever been run, in every case study. If somebody comes back and they have sleep apnea, that is the first thing that gets fixed because you're not getting enough oxygen to your brain at night. Case in point, like you've got to get oxygen to your brain at night, that you're not going to get deep sleep without it, and you're going to drop oxygen levels in your cells. You've got to fix the sleep apnea. So if you suspect that, number one thing to start with. Stress management is another huge pillar that is really difficult, especially in today's world. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of different things pulling us different ways. So how do we manage our stress? A daily practice is really key. Breath work, like box breathing, meditation, if you want to go that right, or just mindfulness. And I like to explain mindfulness, how kind of I was taught about mindfulness is like mindfulness isn't sitting down, legs crossed, like hands up. That's meditation. That's like deep study meditation. Mindfulness is more of feeling where your body's at in the moment. So for me right now, thinking about how my feet are touching the floor, thinking about, the breath going into my lungs, that's mindfulness, kind of centers you back to yourself, takes your brain out of everything going on around you and puts you where you are. That's what I'm talking about. Time outside in nature is really important as well. There was a study done in New York a few years ago where they had people simply walk around Central Park and tested their heart rate, tested their brain after, and they had significant drops in cortisol levels just going on a walk through Central Park instead of the city every single day. So that's really key. You could also need to eliminate unneeded stressors from your life. I've had people come into the program and they're telling me about all these things they're doing in their life, and I'm like, do you have to, uh, you know, go to this extra workout class? No. Well, okay, let's cut it out. Do you have to sit and watch the news every night before bed? Well, no. Okay, well, let's cut it out because it's stressing you out. Do you have to scroll Facebook first thing in the morning? No. Okay, well, let's cut it out. Unneeded stressors are, killers that we don't necessarily need in our day to day. So figuring out what that is and cutting it out is really key. And there's so many things that people you might not think are unneeded. Like you think that you have to do certain things, but let's take stock. Do you really need to do them if they're really, really stressing you out and causing issues? Even 5 minutes of slow breathing measurably lowers cortisol. Again, the box breathing, and box breathing is, um, you can do it multiple different ways. I typically like to say start with like a 4 second inhale, 4 second hold, 4 second exhale, 4 second hold, and that's like the box. And you can increase that if it's too easy to do 4 seconds, go up to 5, 6, 7 seconds, and you just do that for 2 to 5 minutes to start. I like to tell my clients to do it before bed, and so I think that that's a really great way to manage that a little bit better. But the big key, finding what works for you, is the key. I've had clients take a bath with warm tea 3 times a week. I've had clients go to the sauna. I've had clients sit down and do arts and crafts because it calms them. They're focused on the arts and crafts. Whatever works for you, and that's what you need to be doing. Brain stimulation, which is what used to be talked about a little too much, with like do crosswords, do Sudoku. But now we can talk a little bit more in depth what brain stimulation actually is. You could use a site like Brain HQ, which comes with the Recode and Precode account, which is shown in clinical studies. They did their own clinical study to actually increase cognition and cognitive ability because the games are scientifically created to enhance cognitive ability instead of just doing the same things over and over. It works on executive function, memory, speed, things like that. So you could use something like that or other cognitive training programs, or we could learn a new thing. I had a client this past week tell me that they wanted to learn how to paint. That's what they wanted to do to de-stress one and learn something new. And so that's what we're doing. You could learn an instrument. Things that are novel are really important as well. So if you've lived in the same town for 20 years and you're like, I've never actually been to the Arboretum across town. Go do something new. That's going to stimulate your brain as well. And then social engagement. Being socially isolated is a really, really big issue, especially in the age of social media, whenever we see more people than ever, but we're more disconnected than ever. And so joining a Bible study, joining a social club, just asking friends to go out to coffee, really, really key as well, to make that happen. Detoxification is one that I think is coming to fruition a lot more in the online space, but I think there's a lot of misinformation about toxins, a lot of misinformation about what's actually going on in your body with the toxins. But when it comes to your brain, really, we want to just make sure we're reducing environmental toxins in the home. If you have an actual toxic load or toxic burden, we would need urine tests, blood tests to see if that's the case. And if that's the case, it's a much more in-depth protocol. So I'm not really going to talk about that much in here. But with the detoxification, we want to reduce environmental toxins with non-toxic cookware, personal care items, home cleaning items, just to make sure that we're not getting and inhaling and absorbing, microplastics and these harmful chemicals into our body, which can be hard because a lot of times they're a little more expensive. But just starting with one little thing at a time can really be helpful. Even just taking away, plastic bottles. I'm using my metal bottle consistently is really helpful. If you want to just naturally work on detoxification, sweating is huge. So working out in the outside when it's summer, going to the sauna is a really big one. Supporting natural detox pathways through making sure that your gut health is functioning well, and then intaking, like herbal teas, green teas, things like that are going to help detox as well. Anything that's going to help the liver, because the liver is your natural detox organ. And then last thing, supplementation. So everybody likes to talk about supplementation. I'm just going to cover the four basic ones that I always recommend to people, but there's a little caveat to that. So omega 3s, anything DHA is really important. We want to make sure you're getting as many omega 3 as possible. Now, if you're intaking, 2 nights of salmon, some sardines, maybe some walnuts throughout the week, you might not need to supplement with omega 3s. But supplementation by itself, anyway, you're not going to go over likely unless you're just destroying salmon all week trying to get your omega 3s in. You should be fine taking an omega 3 supplement. I recommend Nordic Naturals usually. For things like an omega 3, though, don't order them from Amazon. Don't get them from a big box store. Order them straight from the source, because think about what happens with anything that Amazon ships to you, sits in a warehouse for who knows how long. Omega 3 fish oil can go bad. And so anything like a supplement, like a probiotic, don't order it from Amazon. It's going to sit on the warehouse shelf and it's likely going to go bad at some point. We don't want that to happen. Vitamin D. If you want to get the vitamin D3 K2, it'll absorb a little bit better. Also, a really essential one in the winter. Magnesium glycinate, or for better absorption into your brain, magnesium threonate. It's just a little more expensive, but I think that one is more effective for crossing the blood-brain barrier and actually helping with inflammation in the brain. And then a B complex or B vitamins, especially talking about B12, folate, and B1, which is thiamine. We want to make sure that you're getting enough of those in. Whenever my mom was diagnosed, her B12 was bottomed out completely. And then I just had a woman actually be bottomed out on B1. Fixing the thiamine was extremely helpful. Now, these are the foundational supplements that I recommend. They'll move the needle for almost anyone, especially if your nutrition's not necessarily dialed in, but they're not the whole picture. Everyone should have a personalized supplement protocol. This is where the in-depth blood work comes in, because I could say this: you might not need vitamin D, you might not need omega 3, but you might need iron, you might need vitamin A, you might need a lot of different things that aren't covered in these supplementation basics. So the blood work is going to be the key in understanding exactly what you need to supplement most with. Going into that, I want to talk about why working inside Precode Recode is just different, and you'll see more results in getting to the root causes through the actual programs than just doing everything from home. Because the pillars above will get you started, but they're not going to identify the specific factors in the decline or prevention in your individual case, because we can also look at prevention reports. Because without the data, you're guessing. Essentially, at the end of the day, you're doing what you can and following those pillars, but the confidence is going to come from the data and understanding exactly what's going on. So comprehensive baseline blood work is a part of the Recode Precode report, a part of those accounts, looking at 50 plus biomarkers. If we're looking at like a Recode account for someone that actually has decline, the test covers p-tau, it covers amyloid beta, and it covers NFL, which are all key biomarkers and blood work indicators of an Alzheimer's diagnosis. And so if you're getting those tested, you can actually see the decline, those dropping or rising throughout the protocol as they get retested. And so for somebody that actually has diagnosis, that's extremely, extremely important and helpful. And that doesn't get covered in the standard of care. They don't do that. They do the MRIs, they do the PET scans. Now they're starting to do the blood work, but they're not going to retest the blood work because after you get the blood work, they just tell you have Alzheimer's and send you on your way. Cognitive assessments outside of the MoCA, there are a few more like CNS vital signs that get done for measurable starting points and every 6 months. Personalized recode and precode reports. After you get those two things done, you then get a report that shows you your exact specific risk factors and shows you the targeted advice and protocol and interventions that deal directly with you. And I think that is so important and so cool because there's so many times I've worked with clients that don't want to do those, don't want to do the tests. They're like, I don't want to do the blood work. Just tell me what to do. And we eventually hit a point where it's like, I need to see more data. I can't move you forward because you're doing all the basic things and we're fixing a couple other things that I know are wrong, but I need to see more. And the data is really, really helpful. With that, you're also going to get ongoing tracking, adjustments, number changes, because the Apollo Health team and the Apollo Health platform, and if you're working with a practitioner in this that's good, they're going to do all of this stuff that's going to be magnificent in helping you move forward. You also get the access to like that brain HQ that I talked about, and then a ton of educational resources. With education, though, we need to be careful. And I'm going to talk about why towards the end. But what I add as a coach, because a lot of people have had questions about coaching, I'm just going to cover this. I'm not trying to pitch you anything, but understanding like what does a brain health coach even do is kind of difficult. Accountability through weekly, biweekly conversations and protocol implementation. So within Recode, people get the report, people get their pre-code report, walking through it step by step in that way that I mentioned earlier is key. I translate the noise and the science because there's so many opinions out there, so much science out there that can be confusing into your daily plan that fits your life. I'll tell you, no, that doesn't matter. Or yes, this is really important. Keto Flex 12-3 is nutrition coaching is my baby. I am a nutrition coach at heart. So even though the behavior change and the brain health stuff is way up my alley as well, I'm huge on nutrition, including meal planning, grocery support, and working through day to day with macros, calories, anything that's going to help you get into ketosis. Sleep, stress, movement coaching, obviously very important. That comes along with the category. Detoxification support, I can do. I'm going to be the first to say, like, I'm not the greatest at talking about detox, but I will find people that are going to help you do that. If there's something that I'm not good at, I'm going to find somebody that is. MoCA assessments, like I said, I'm certified in that. That's another thing that a coach can do within the protocol every 6 months to track real progress. Now, if you're prevention based, we might do one just to see where you're at, and you likely wouldn't need to do another one unless there was a little bit of issue with it. And then if you're somebody who is here for a loved one, like you're a care partner, you help take care of somebody with Alzheimer's, or maybe somebody was newly diagnosed, or you're somebody's son or daughter, like myself, I work with you throughout the protocol. Anybody that's got a diagnosis or has mild cognitive impairment and needs help, I always like to bring the care partner in to do it with them because that is going to be vital in seeing long-term success. And then 24/7 tech support between the clinical sessions. I hope this was really eye-opening. This call was all about showing you that there is another path. I want the new gold standard to come full force and break down the old model of the single drug approaches that don't work, the diagnose and send on your way that doesn't work, that has put people in really bad positions for the last 3 decades. The Recode protocol is backed by science, proven in clinical practice. That clinical trial just came out in January where 50 out of the 73 people in the trial, the other 23 were the control. So they weren't even doing the protocol, but the other 50 were. Every single person improved their cognitive scores, reversed their cognitive decline. So if that doesn't say something, I don't know what will. Whether you start with foundations on your own or come to the program, the most important thing though is that you start. If you want to get started or you want to just talk about what those things are, I'm do free 30-minute meet and greets. No pressure, just a conversation. Just reach out to me and we can talk about it. But I'm going to open the floor to all Q&A. You can put in the chat for the Q&A. You can come off mute if you want to. I'll give it just a second for anything to come into the
I
chat.
I
Okay.
have a question.
Yeah.
Um, Part of my problem is, I have the double gene. Okay.
Hmm.
Um, I was always very athletic, active, um, and for the past 10 years, I've been in a wheelchair.
Gotcha.
So I'm not as physically active. I have a pain condition, so I don't sleep that well. And I know that all of these are problems, but it's a struggle to know, everybody says, walk, you've got to
Hmm.
exercise, you've got to do it. And I'm in the wheelchair. And I know I can do some things, but not as much as I could.
Right.
And I really think that I do need guidance on how to very specifically for my problems move forward
Yeah.
to prevent this. So I'm not sure. I think a coach is a good idea. Um, so I'd be very interested in finding out more about that.
Okay. I'm actually gonna, so if you want to join a call, there's a couple other questions, but so for you, like I said, had mentioned in the training, you have to meet yourself where you're at, right?
Yeah.
So I'm not gonna ever say like, well, you need to be doing more. Like we need to be doing what you can.
Yeah.
The sleep, especially with the pain, I've worked with people that have had similar issues, and it really is like looking at, okay, can we mitigate the pain as much as possible by dropping as much inflammation as possible through diet?
Mhm.
Um, and then any other factors that we might see in, say, your blood work, that are going to be key to dropping that inflammation. Because I've had people that have also had, conditions that have caused excessive pain. I have a client right now like that, and we've dropped their inflammation drastically. They still have a little bit of pain, especially every now
Yeah.
and then, but it can be mitigated really, really well if we do the right things.
Right.
Now I'd have to talk to you in depth about like what that condition actually is and what else you have going on, but there is possibilities, especially to get to a point where for prevention, I can never tell somebody, hey, you're going to be 100% positive you're never going to get this disease. I can
Yeah.
tell people, we're going to make you as confident as possible that you're mitigating your chances, especially with the ApoE44. There are a lot of different other factors in play with the ApoE4 that we can start looking at, especially if you wanted to get other genetic testing. Because sometimes
Mhm.
the ApoE4 doesn't even matter if you don't have like 10 of the other genes that play into it. It's not nearly
I
as
see.
hard hitting. And so there's a lot of factors that go into that.
Okay.
But I can grab my uh, link for the call and drop it in the chat. And for anybody else that's still on the call, um, you can also click the link and book one, um, if you want to. That'd be probably be the easiest
Okay.
to do.
Okay.
I'll also have a link in an email sent out tomorrow, that'll
Great.
cover that.
Okay, great.
Okay. I just
Wonderful.
dropped the link in the chat. So if anybody wants to book, they can. Kelly asked
Thank
in the
you.
chat, do you work in conjunction with somebody's primary care provider or other health practitioners? Yes, I would prefer it even. Because as a health coach, there are a lot of things that I can't run on my own. And if your health practitioner is like fully on board, yes, 100%. Um, I can even help people if you wanted to work with a Recode certified practitioner. I can find them on my side and actually help you find somebody in your area if that's the case. But in short, yeah, I work with primary care providers, health practitioners if they're up for it. Okay, what other questions we got, if any? If not, if there's no more questions, I'll assume I just did a really good job of explaining everything. Do you have an age limit? No, there's no age limit to the protocol. Like I had mentioned, I think a little bit, the case study was done at 75, but there's people that are in their late 80s doing this protocol as well in the studies. If you want to have a feel good story in your life, there was a lady named Judy, and she just at 82, I believe, she was diagnosed with Alzheimer's 10 years ago, went through this protocol, completely reversed everything. And at 82, this past year, she just walked across America, coast to coast at 82, which is insane because she had turned her life around so much. So, age is just a number. I don't like people saying like, well, it's just because you're getting older, because I think that you can be better 5 years from now than you were 5 years ago. Any other questions? You can come off mute too, or put them in the chat if you would like to. Okay. Well, thank you all so much for staying along so long. I know that this was a um, very long call. There's a lot of information. If you want to book a call, the link is in the chat, but it'll also get sent out tomorrow in an email. And so if you want to respond to that email or ask me any other questions, you can. You should have my email at this point or my text. So just do that. But thank you all so much. I'm going to go ahead and end the call. And if you have any questions, please just reach out.